that we have no better way to start this lecture. My sister, you're full of praise of the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit. We give thanks. Yes. That means, put your hands together for Elby Francis. And I'll read the reason. Now, anybody, any question for my sister in here? Before we go to the other speaker. Because, you know, she really brings us in a whole spiritual realm. And that's where we have to be. Because we know that we are spirit, but still we need the flesh to take over. That's why we forget that we are living souls. That means, nobody have nothing to ask my sister? Let me put your hands together for my sister. Yes. Yes, I mean, we can see how important is the value of life. And that God is merciful. He gives us life, He forgives us when we trespass against each other life. You understand? But that's why we have to do this type of edification and lecture them. Because life is not just you're alive, but it starts from the womb. You understand? And I mean, what the sister say, make you go deep in yourself and analyze it. Not for we, especially man, a woman, we do a lot of mistakes on the way. But we have a chance now to appreciate the value of life and give life a second chance. Because when we give life a second chance, we give God a second chance in our life. Bless Him. Now, we're going to call my beloved brother, Rodney C. Davis. Put your hands together for the brethren there. And you need any help, so everything good, because I got my brother Emilio there if you need any help. Well, my brother, this is brother Rodney C. Davis. He's a social worker at Sandaya School, as we know, and he himself will give you more about what he has to tell us about the value of life. Give thanks for life.
I learned a lot just listening. I just want to have a conversation with you all, sharing a couple of stories about my experiences as a parenting educator for the last 10 or 12 years at the Sandaya School. I consider it a privilege because a lot of times working within the school, what happens to us is we're representing the school, we're representing our school board, and we're supposed to be dealing with parents. And sometimes we don't get a chance to share with the parents exactly what our experiences are with the children. And so I'm thankful for this opportunity, all right? To have a heart-to-heart talk about some of the things that sometimes we don't get to say to the parents about what happens in school while we're working with their children, right? So I'm hoping we have a conversation and not just a speech, okay? I made a little presentation, but I'm only going to go back to it if the conversation runs dry. So I really hope we have some interaction here, right? Just some nuggets, some things I've learned over the years working with the children, right? I think the experience of raising children puts adults in a very peculiar situation, right? Because we are asked to guide and to help shape lives, and we are entrusted with the care of, as Renee mentioned just a while ago, what is actually a gift to us, okay? And who in this world can say that we know exactly what we're supposed to do? All right. One of the things I always mention to the parents is that, you know, your experience can't be any more different from mine. The children didn't come with a manual, right? And part of the program that I deliver all the time, that we keep saying to parents is that, you know, all the things that we have to teach, these are things that the experts consider are the best practices, but at the end of the day, even that expert runs into a problem with their own kids every single day. Right? So we might be an expert in a particular program, but it's still left up to every single parent, every single day, to figure out exactly what they have to do in the moment when they're at the time, right? So, that's why we need to have conversations, right? Because experts are being born in the moment. Okay, that's the way our children are. So let me share a couple of stories that I've gone through over the years. I think we will eliminate some things. One common theme that comes up all the time is this story with a child coming into my office and saying, Meneer, I just can't talk to my mother, or I just can't talk to my father. Right? And anytime they say this, the faces keep changing in front of me, but the issue is something that comes up over and over and over again, right? So this is one of the reasons why I want to mention it. And so, to fast forward, what happens is at some point we're going to call in a parent. And let me tell you what happens 9 times out of 10, right? Part of the conversation with that parent, somewhere along the line before the parent leaves my office, is going to say to me, let me tell you something, Mr. Davis. Me and my children, you see, we are so close, my children could tell me anything. Right? And I'm left there, okay, it puts us in a very funny situation, right? Because there you are, the children told you some things in confidence, and so you can't go and tell mommy what everything that they tell you, because then your business is bad. The children are not going to come and tell you their stories if you go and lurch out to mommy or daddy. So to a certain extent, for certain things, you have to hold confidence. Right? But this brings us to this whole concept of what is really going on here, right? This child actually feels that she cannot talk to her parents, and the parents is telling me, that child is, as parents, they're wide open, the children can come and talk to them. Okay? And so what we see happen with this one, a lot of times, parents trying to impress the school or the school officials, and that's not what it's all about, really. Okay, somewhere along the line, somebody's going to find out what the truth is, and so when the dust settles, most of the time I have to end up trying to get the 2 parties actually having an honest conversation. Okay, and I must tell you that 9 times out of 10 also, what we find out is that the truth falls most of the time a little bit closer to what the child was saying. Let me correct that. 10 times out of 10. Right? So I wanted to share that with you because it's something that happens all the time. Okay? So it reached the ridiculous point where whenever a parent looks at me and says, let me tell you something, Mr. Davis. My children could, from the time they say those words, I start scratching my head. Right? Because it's so difficult to deal with, right? Because I'm going to have to find a way to get through, to let that parent first open themselves up, get honest, and to understand that I'm not here for them to impress, right? And so that's one of the things I wanted to share, right? One year, I remember, and they're giving us a set program, and we deliver it every single year, about 3 times a year. And so in the middle of my spiel, after talking for about half an hour, one day a father got up and said, and then he starts to address the other parents, and I got quiet. He said, the long and short of all of these things that Mr. Davis is saying is that you have to keep your children close to you. And that started a little conversation between them. I put down my microphone and I took a seat. And I started to let myself be schooled because the discussion that was coming up from these parents was really, really tremendous, right? The 2 things are connected, right? Because what happens, I see, is that a lot of times the relationship is not what it's supposed to be. Okay? We get all of this training and all of this socialization and all of this upbringing, right, from our own parents. And what happens most of the time is, we're just repeating some of the things that we went through, right? Now, I have to be careful here because there's a place for tradition, there's a place for culture, and there's a place for learn best practices, right? But I always tell people if something is not working and you're running into a problem, well, one definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? So if I have a parent in front of me and they look at me and they're telling me, yeah, but this is what I have to do, then I have to ask them, so why are you here? Why are we talking? There's obviously a problem, right? And so the point I'm trying to make here is that when the dust finally settles, almost all the time what we're finding out is that the parent has a little problem and it's about opening up, right? And so that leads us to what I think is missing, okay? Because it's something that there's nothing that I can teach that you don't already know. Okay? It's just about reminding people to get in touch with themselves, right? Because that child that we're all rearing is a unique, special person, and the person that they're going to become, to a certain extent, is predetermined. But another part of it says that the guidance that you provide is going to determine how far a child is going to go. So, what I want to bring to the table is, with children, we have to get very, 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 very real. We have to get vulnerable, because sometimes we have this notion somewhere up in our minds that I have to be the leader in my home. I have to lead. And so that brings connotations of how I must be, I must be the authority, right? I think love and compassion has a much better place, a better role to play in all parenting practices, right? Because that child that is thinking that they can't talk to their parent only needs a listening ear, right? So I tell a parent every now and again, could you listen to your child for maybe like 15 minutes without saying anything? Even if you're hearing something that you think is really off the mark, but just listen. At the end of the 15 minutes, you might still think that it's really off the mark. But I want you to dig deeper and listen, not so much to what they're saying, but what the child is feeling while they're saying it, right? And do your child a favor. If you can identify what the child is feeling, and feed what the child is feeling back to that child, then you can now proceed to the next step of correcting whatever the child was saying. Because when the child said that they wanted to be listened to, that's what they really mean. Okay? Every child knows that they're supposed to get guidance from the parent. They will listen. But like all human beings, we don't react very well to being told that we have to listen to people who don't want to listen to us. Common sense, right? Mm-hmm. So people come with these things all the time, and when you break down all of the research that's done, it comes right back down to common sense, right? It's human nature. Every person in this room will feel a lot better if they're having a conversation with anybody else and the person takes the time to listen very keenly to what you're saying. Give some kind of indication that they're being taken seriously. And then after that, if there's something to be straightened out, then we proceed to straighten it out, right? And so if there's one thing I want to leave with the room is this is a message I'm getting from the children all the time. And every single person in this room, I think everybody on the planet actually, myself included, there is room for improvement there. Love and compassion. You cannot have too much of it at home. Okay? The roles that society tells us we must play, especially in our families, interferes with that. Okay? I'm here to tell you that I think in the deepest sense we all know instinctively what to do. Most of our problem is that we don't reach that far within ourselves to get in touch with that instinct. Alright? So I don't come particularly from a spiritual place, but I do know that this is the sort of thing that has helped me in my own family life in bringing up my own children. That you have to reconnect with your spiritual self and find a silent, quiet place at least once a day, where you can hear your inner voice speak. Okay? Many of us walk around and we don't listen. We're not even aware that that voice is there, talking to us all the time. Much less listen to it. Okay? I think parenting is just one of the many things that benefits if we take the time to reach and find that inner voice and really listen to it. Okay? The parent that comes to me that is in a quandary, not knowing what decision to make. People who work in our line of work, we're very reluctant to give advice, right? Unless you see there's no alternative. But what works most of the time is if you can get that person to really do a deep reflection, they come to the correct answers most of the time. So the answer is within you. Okay? It's just about trying to reach it. So that was the first one. I only have three, but they're the three biggest ones. The next one I wanted to mention is this contradiction we find all the time with kids who come to school and they're one child in the school, they're one child, and another child at home. So a couple of years ago I got in the habit of when a parent would come who is saying that, I'm just that in my child, you've heard these stories before, right? It's like, it goes something like this. Miss, the school has said that your child has done X, Y, or Z. And the person goes, me? Not my child. I know everything. And the story goes on, right? And so, if you're experienced enough in these matters, what you learn to do is to be very quiet. And what I started doing is I would bring the parent in during the day, and I would bring them in our little security group there at Sunday school. And there's a one-way mirror. So we can see outside when the children are playing, but the children can't see inside the office. Right? And so if I'm lucky, I could get the parents to observe their own child when the child doesn't know. Let me tell you, we've had some very, very interesting experiences in this practice. Right? I mean, really, really interesting. By the end of it, sometimes you have the parent walking out through the office. This time they're scratching their head, doing something like, oh, I didn't know my child would behave like that. Right? And then the conversation has to begin again in the office, right? But this time, there can't be any, my child don't behave so because you just saw, right? So I wasn't complaining to you about your child really. I was just bringing something to your attention so that we could find a solution, right? And so we have to go sometimes through this long, drawn-out thing with me having to convince a parent, once again, that you are not here to impress me. We are both here to help your child, right? So You don't have to start to tell me about what all you do at home and that your child stays over here like that at home. Because the minute the parent says that to me, I can point to another problem. Because if that child is one person at home and is totally a different person when the authority person is not around, they are totally different. 10 times out of 10, it's because that child is not themselves in a home. Does that make sense? Right? It's a common problem with Caribbean parents, right? We tend to be very authoritarian, right? I know because that's the kind of home I came from. That's how I raised my children for many years. And in my house, it was my way or the highway. There was no discussion, right? And if you have a strong-willed child, you might butt heads. But at the end of the day, if you are the stronger one, what's going to happen is that child is going to behave how you want it to behave. But that child will not be itself. So that's where you have the split. Since I must behave this way at home and I can't express who I am, then I will be a certain way at home. And I won't show you who I really am. That's a problem when you're a parent and you don't really know who your child is. Not because you don't try, but because the child refuses to show you. But we have to get parents to see that there's a reason why the child won't show you, right? It's fear. And we have to get rid of that fear. So in the home, the love and the compassion we're talking about has to replace that fear. And the question I ask parents all the time to consider is, if I look inside your child's head, am I going to see fear? Or am I going to see mostly love and compassion? Because if it's love and compassion, that child will be able to come and say what they want to say. And feel safe, still. Right? So notice there's a lot of things I'm not saying. I'm not talking specifically about corporal punishment or any of those things. We are supposed to draw the obvious conclusions, right? That there is a better way. Okay? So that was the second thing. I really hope we have a conversation about it afterwards because I know it's controversial. Right? In researching the program that we had to deliver in the schools, we came across a lot of things, and some of these methods that are seemingly just being developed, right? But there's a very interesting thing that I'm finding out the more I'm doing research, right? Because there's something that's ongoing, you have to keep researching. One of the things I'm finding out is that a lot of the new methods that are coming out are based on cutting-edge scientific discovery and research work. I'm talking about the very latest in neuroscience and so on. I'm finding some very common themes between these new things and spiritual teachings that were in place 2,000 years ago. And the more the science is getting accurate, the more accurate it's getting, the more it's sounding like spiritual teachings from 2,000 years ago. That's just my observation, right? So when I mention things like love and compassion, there are scientists who are beginning to study these things in a very deep way, and examining the role between that and leadership, and how leadership emerges in children, and how these children learn to interpret their world, and how they learn to negotiate their way through the world, and how they learn to succeed, and how they learn to stand up and be bold instead of never wanting to take a risk, right? And there are strong connections between these things. But what I want to say is that, again, I'm reading these things all the time, and it's coming to me as science, but I heard them before. You've heard them before, right? So again, it's about visiting these things again, right? I feel that if a relationship with a child is there, everything else falls into place. You don't need no expert to come and tell you anything. So if I want to leave one final message with you, it's that, right? Use common. We are supposed to use common sense in our homes, right? So it's about making sure that the relationship is there first and foremost. Okay. Every single situation that came to me over the years, where there was a discipline problem, we found that it wasn't really a discipline problem; it was a relationship problem. We have parents trying to discipline a child that they have no relationship with, or the relationship was on a low and needing some catching up, and needed some bonding, needed to spend some time having fun. Simple things, right? And these things work. They're very simple things, but they work. Okay? I knew, for example, that anytime my son, for example, was always this nerd type guy, I never had a problem with him. The only problem I had with him is if family wanted to go somewhere, there's a party or an outing, he never wanted to go anywhere, he wanted to stay in his books. Nice problem to have, right? So he wasn't the problem. My daughter, on the other hand, she was a rebellious one while she was growing up. And I remember distinctly, after learning some of the things that we were teaching, because you have to practice what you preach, I learned very quickly that when she was talking back to me, yes, I would do some things to apply discipline, but I would make a little mental note that we have to take a little trip to the beach, or we have to go and visit her little friends that used to live down the road, because she used to enjoy when I took her there. And anytime I took the time to do that, the next day or the next week, I had no problems, right? So, I'm going to say for the last time, 10 times out of 10, discipline problems don't really exist. They're really relationship problems. And that's what I want to leave you with. Okay, so my little talk is done. I really wanted to open up for questions. And I don't care what kind of questions they are. It could be closely related to parenting. It doesn't have to be.
This is a kind of link between what Colonel May was discussing and yourself. For example, you talk about be fruitful and multiply. At the same time, would you say, is there a right time to multiply in terms of as a human being? Is there a right time for a human being to be ready? Or maybe a human being is not always ready to multiply, so to speak. What do you think about that?
I'm glad you say, what do you think? Because I can only tell you what I think, and I'm no authority on this subject. I don't think there's any such thing as a proper time. I do believe, however, that what we are looking at is children have the means to have children before they're ready to have children, so to speak. All right, so we can make some general statements that even though biologically we might be able to reproduce, we see common sense tells us, we see the mischief that is created when children have children too young. Okay. Every year we get a new cohort into the school, and there's a little 13-year-old coming in for the first time. And every time I would go by the guidance counselor who has been with the school for close to 30 years. Why? Because she knows the children like, and she knows every single, I swear Jackie knows every single family in Japan. Probably not, but that's how it feels to me. But she could look at me and say, you see that one model came here 15 years ago. 15 years ago. Anytime she says that, there's a very, very high chance that we will have to spend a lot of time with that particular child. Now, that's not to say that there aren't exceptions to the rule, but that should help answer the question.
The statement that Rodney just made actually is connected spiritually as well, because the sins of the forefathers passed down to generations, or the patterns, the family patterns are passed down. And so there are times that if that pattern is not interrupted, it will just continue and it will escalate that. I see sometimes some parents, they're like, I don't know where my child will get this from. And if you look at them, if you look at their behavior, if you look at their mannerism, if you look at their character, you recognize that the child got it from them. But what happens is, as the generations go, it escalates. It goes a higher notch. And as the culture also changes and other things are added to that, it gets worse. And of course, the reverse is also true. If you have parents, as Rodney mentioned, who set certain values and inculcate them in their children, then they grow up with those values. Doesn't mean as well, because they have their own mind, that some of them won't change from it. But it's a seed that you sow, that's what you're going to reap.
Conversation.
Okay, somebody has something to say? You see? I know you have something to say.
I'm trying to understand the definition of common sense.
Common sense. Come with sense. Okay.
Yes, that's a good question, because the saying goes that common sense isn't really common at all.
I like this, but I would like to hear yours.
You want somebody else to?
No, I like his definition, which I wasn't prepared for, but I would like to hear your definition.
I don't want to, I kind of want to run with the same one. Conventional wisdom, that's another word for it. There are beliefs and practices that we all hold to be true. And most people hold to be true. And things that should be relatively easy to figure out, because they're logical. Right? The problem with common sense is that any piece of common sense you give me, I can find another piece that contradicts it. And that's the reason why I particularly like science. Because science to me is common sense on steroids. You have to really go and take things and study it, read people, study it, and find out what is really going on with 1,000 people. And so it's still common sense, but it's common sense from a lot of people, right? Having said that, I still don't know what common sense is. So give somebody else it. Anybody else want to have a crack at it? I think we're going to have to go and rest this. I like last explanation.
I'm also a scientist and believe strongly in science. And one of my concerns with the young people today is the power of the media. Because we've gone from a society of family orientation to machine orientation. Children will accept what the machine tells them is truth sometimes long before they accept what their parents tell them is truth. And I think that's part of this rapid maturing that's going on. The media is maturing them so fast that it's creating a lot of the confusions that they're feeling. That for me is one of my bigger concerns, is the power of the media on the young people right now.
Over here. Over here.
I want to respond to what you said. I'm very glad you brought up that topic, right? Because conventional wisdom, I'm going to call it that, has it that the children are more in tune with the technology than most of their parents, right? And so we see this happening in homes a lot where parents are taking a step back because of that, okay? I don't know if I agree with the statement that it leads to maturity. It leads to me to more access to knowledge, information, but at the same time, it lessens access to guidance. I'm going to say that again because I think it's really important, right? There's a big difference between guidance and knowledge. You could educate a child, teach them things, but without the guidance, you could be educating a child to be a criminal, and a very good one at that, right? So the guidance. And so it comes back again to what we were talking about the relationship, right? And so I advocate very simple things again. There are certain things we should never throw away from all of our cultures, like having a meal together as a family once a day, where the little 4-inch screen has to be turned off or put aside, and we look at each other eyeball to eyeball and have a conversation, right? Those things are very, very important because there's nothing wrong with the media and the technology, but we're allowing it to replace our normal means of socialization. And mind wasn't made to be socialized with a 4-inch screen. There's extra things that happen to us that are beneficial to us when we look at each other face to face and acknowledge each other without saying a word. And I look at you and I see you, and you look at me and you see me. Before we exchange a word, there's a lot of nice things that are happening that you can't get from that 4-inch screen. And so the word to parents is encourage the technology, but don't allow it to replace what you already know. And there's room for both.
Since you're speaking science too.
What Rodney just mentioned about the meal, they've actually scientifically proven that families that rear children, where they sit down at the table and have a meal, that they're less likely to be involved in criminal activity, less likely to be in prison, and they have a whole bunch of statistics on that. So again, that value that we know to be good and to create the kind of children that we want to create, that's been thrown to the wayside, but it's shown to actually work.
And that is true because if the mother and father home working, and who gonna eat with the child? Or when do they have time to eat with the child? I'm coming for you, Greg. Let me get into this history. You content?
This is complicated, so it becomes more complicated as it goes on.
It's more sweeter, more blessed.
Pass.
Okay, because when knowledge increases, you gotta give thanks now.
Yes, the quick question is this: how do we, when we speak of the values, the principles, the guidance, and again that relationship between the family, what happens when we're dealing with you mentioned earlier, careful with the culture when we apply it. What happens when we live in a society like Simar, where we boast of over 100 different cultures, that is living here, and then you as educator have to now try to see the same values that one would be taught. It's not exactly that the other culture has been taught that same way. How do you then manage to create that sort of educational classroom where you want to now teach these children these particular values, but at home, that is not the cultural values that these persons live with? How do we do that?
Interesting. Give us, my sister heard me, Francis Cotton, she has other appointments, serious appointment. I mean, I think we got this excuse.
I didn't want to leave us.
But after this one, you should carry on with after this one.
Very interesting question, because this is an argument we have amongst teachers all the time. I notice that in working with my colleagues, especially if they're from Europe, they tend to be like this, and they're saying certain things should happen in the home, and that's not my responsibility. I don't teach that stuff, right? While people from this side, we tend to be a little bit more willing to go there, right? So I don't know what the answer is for any particular school. What I can say is, to me, the onus falls decidedly on the parents at home to impart certain values and to teach the culture, right? I tell my colleagues that there's a lot of children who don't have that at home, and so we have to provide some kind of a safety net and fill in the cracks. But I also tell them at the end of the sentence that, but I do agree with you that it's a responsibility of the home. What I don't agree with is that if you abdicate your responsibility as an educator by saying if the parents are not doing it, then it's not my job to do it, because I feel just the opposite. That if a child comes to you and you can see that they're not getting it somewhere else, and you have an opportunity to be the guidance that that child needs, you provide the guidance. Call yourself an educator, then there should be no question.
Yeah, I'll say this, and I do have to leave.
On the road.
There's a song that I hear ringing in my head that goes, "Love in any language, straight from the heart, binds us all together, never apart." And why that song is ringing in my head? Because when you have different cultures, love knows no language, love knows no culture. And so if, as a teacher, you're coming from a place of love and compassion, it doesn't matter what the culture is of that student, because you recognize the value of that person that is in front of you, and you're not looking at religion, you're not looking at the culture, you're not looking at where they're from, but you're looking at the value of this person, and that this person has a purpose and is loved by God and is loved by you. And when you take that perspective and you're not being judgmental, then it transforms everything. And that is really the essence of what it's going to take in order to deal with such a cultural mix that we have.
Okay, well, put your hands together for my brother and my sister in Francis. And it's really interesting. But my sister and me, we're gonna work together to do a lecture like this again, the value of life. And we're gonna go more deep in it. Okay, bless you. Okay. Yes, now, for me to see the value of life, we see different perspectives. Okay, we get the spiritual side of it, we get the social side of it, but now we're gonna get now the physical side of it.